Good morning and welcome back to COVID Computer Camp. Really excited to be doing a Hangman game today. I was just telling my live audience that I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach today and start off by showing you how I planned this file. I did this one at the last minute. I just came up with it Friday afternoon after our last broadcast, and it's Monday morning now. And so I've over the weekend I did a little bit of tweaking and just built this project from scratch in Scratch, right? And I want to show you a little bit about how I did that. So let's get over to our master screen. All right. So if you all have your starter file loaded up, remember you can get to it from my website at chromeworks.ca/lessons. Let's have a look at the sprites first. We'll have a quick boo at the sprites here. So I'm in a sprite here called alphabet, and it's just all the letters of the alphabet, right? A, B, C each. So I just basically typed one letter in, made the font look the way that I wanted it to look, and then just started duplicating it by right-clicking and duplicating, and then edited the text. It's really important if you've got multiple costumes that take the same place that everything be in the exact same spot. Like if this was off on the side here, it wouldn't look very good, right? Everything would be flying around, and you wouldn't have a really clean organization of words at the top of your screen. So let me see if I can undo that mess that I did with the D, probably, or it was with the E actually. So I'm just going to move that back to the middle again. This new function in Scratch has just been around for a couple of months. It's really helpful. This little target in the middle of your screen, and there's another target in the middle of your object. So if you want stuff perfectly centered, it's a lot easier to snap it to the middle than it used to be, and I really like that function. Okay, so we've got all our letters lined up here. We need two sets of letters, though. This set of letters is going to go across the top of the screen, and that's going to be the word that you're picking. So every time you successfully select a word, that letter will show up here, along with the underlines showing you how many letters there are in your word. There's a second set of letters is going to go along the bottom of the screen, and that's these ones with a black background. It's the same letters, a little bit smaller. I just basically duplicated the alphabet sprite, and this one is going to be a list of the whole alphabet along the bottom of the screen. And when you click on a letter, that's going to be your pick for that round. And if you picked it correctly, it'll show up here, right? Notice I put it against a black background, and that's because we're going to be doing when this sprite clicked event. And the problem with clicked events when you have transparent objects like this is if I click here, I'm fine, but if I click here, it actually won't register it behind the transparency. So if I click like this, it's gonna not know that I clicked on it. So what I have to do is put a black background behind here. Black because it's the same color as the existing background on the screen. If I went with a different colored background, then of course I'd go with a different background here too. And so that way there's a big object for you to click, and no matter where I click, I'm still gonna click on this letter Z no matter what happens. Okay, so having said that, let's go. I wanted to show you a couple of other sprites. So here is the costume for the underline. You cannot see anything here. It's really hard to tell, but there is a sprite here that's just a white line, and that's going to be the underline that tells you how many letters there are on the screen. And there's one other little one that says solved here. That's just a little label beside the scoreboard to tell us how many puzzles we've solved so far. They're very light gray, which is kind of in keeping with the look of this game that I have set up here, but I could go with a different color here if I wanted to. And lastly, I'm using a backdrop. I don't usually use backdrops, but I thought this game would be really suitable for it. So I've got a bunch of different backdrops here. Basically, we're going to go next backdrop as the hangman starts hanging, and you'll just grow limbs until you get to your last one. And then, of course, your player will die. So I got some extra little graphics here to show that your player's dead. Underneath there, I have a bunch more graphics. This is for if you actually succeed, your guy will be outside of the noose, and he'll just start to jump in the air and wave his arms around. And if you win the game, if you win all the questions, like we're gonna have the ability to have multiple questions in here, and if you win all of them, then your tower's gonna come crashing down, and you win the entire game rather than the round, right? So there's gonna be a game-winning event too. Okay, so that's a lot to look at here, guys. Let's go back to another screen that I want to show you right now. So again, how did I plan this game out? The first thing I thought about is what are the steps that have to happen for this game to go. So I'm going to switch over here and show you guys a little thing that I put together that just kind of shows the flow chart of how the game. My guys on Discord as well. Whoa! Sorry about that. I accidentally triggered a sound effect there. Okay, so you guys on Discord should be able to see this now. All right, good. Okay, so this is how I planned out the game, right? I did it into different steps. The first step at the top left there, prep game, and this is the part that we're going to be coding in a minute. So we're going to have a list of words that's all the words that could potentially come up in the game. It might be a list of 3, 4, 5, 10 words, however many you want to. And the idea is it's going to pick, the software is going to pick a random word from that list. It's going to tick it off as used by deleting it from that list. So the next time it goes to the list to pick a random one, it can't pick the one we already picked. The next step is set up match. So we're going to set up the game board. We're going to take that word that we picked and we're going to populate it to the top of the screen so that every letter in the word that we picked shows up along the top of the screen, and every one of them is going to have an underline underneath it so that we know it's there, because the letter is going to be invisible at first, right? Now we go play the game. We're going to play the game by having the letters appear along the bottom of the screen, and we're going to have a click event so that every time we click on one of those letters, it will go and check and see. So that's the play part. It basically, as soon as we click on one of these, it's going to send a message saying, hey, figure out whether this was one of the letters in the word or not. Then after that, we go and evaluate. We keep score by checking how many right and how many wrong answers we have. And if we got a wrong answer, we of course have to hang ourselves. We could take one step further along the chain towards being hanged. Or if we get the question right, we'll be able to keep guessing. And the idea is that after you're done keeping score, we take inventory and we check and see. So we check and see whether we got the whole word right or not, whether we got all the letters. If we did, we prep the game again and we get started with the next round. And if we run out of all the words in our list, then we go to a victory screen, and that's going to be the gallows crashing down. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to you guys. So I didn't do this chart, but I kind of planned it out on paper. What are the different steps we have to do? And as I teach it to you, we're kind of going to be loosely following these steps. So let's start with, the screen's blurry, eh? Okay, well, I guess we could try zooming in on it, but actually it's not really set up that way. Okay, anyway, I gave you the description. I'm going to share this file with you guys on the website. It's going to be inside the documentation for this game as well. So if you want to have a look at it after the fact, you can do that. Let's get back to the coding. All right. So yeah, I think the text on this screen is just a little bit smaller than it needs to be. So I will export this file, save it to the documentation. So if you go to my lessons page and call up the cheat sheet, at the last page of that will be this document if you're interested in looking at it in more detail. Okay, so let's get to the code. The first thing we're going to start coding is our alphabet, right? So we're going to actually make a list of words here using the list function. This is going to be a two-part lesson, by the way, guys. I don't think we're going to get through this in one day, just so that you know. All right, so I'm going over to my variables. I'm on the alphabet variable right now. I'm going to create a couple of lists. I've actually already created them for you in your starter file. One's called the word list, and you can see I put some words in it here. If you want to change the words on the word list, you cannot do it here. We have to do it over on the second list called the word pool. So let me show you the way this works. Every time that we pick a word successfully, it's going to be deleted from this list, and eventually this list will be empty. Then when you hit the reset button again, you're going to have no words to pick from the list anymore. So that's a problem when we're deleting stuff from a list. So what we're doing is creating a master list. I've created this list called word pool. That's the one that's going to refill every time we play the game. This one is going to empty out and refill, based on what's inside this list. So this is my master list. So if you want different words, you're gonna have to change this word pool around. Let me just show you quickly how to edit stuff in here. So let me zoom in a little bit. So if I am if I want to change this elephant to a different word, let's pick a word with a Z in it, because Z's a hard word to get inside this game. We want to trick people with rare letters, right? I'm just going to click on it, and then I can retype what I want. Zombie is my new word. Hit enter, and you see it actually jumped right to my next word again, which was no good actually, because I didn't want to get rid of the second word. Let's put elephant back in here. All right, so I don't want to hit enter because it's going to actually, oh, I spelled elephant wrong. So I'm just going to click outside of this and it'll accept that as an answer. Now, if I have too many words and I want to get rid of one, I can click on the little X here. If I want to add words after I'm done, there's a couple of ways to do it. One way, you can click on the little plus here. Plus like that, it'll create a new word in here. Let me pick a new word then. I'll say testify. Like in court. There's a hard word. I do hard word lists. If you want to do an easy one with words like cat, dog, you can do that as well. I just like my words to be hard in this game. All right, and so as well as hitting plus, while you're editing this list, if you just hit enter, it'll create a new item on your list. Okay, I guess I should create a 12th item here. No, I'll just delete this guy. Okay, so here we go. Hit the X, delete it. Now we're good to go with our list again. Okay, so we made our first list. Now we have to get Scratch to take all the stuff from here and move it onto this list. So let's start working on that. When green flag is clicked. So we'll go to our events, grab a when green flag clicked. Let's maximize it here. And the first thing I want to do is, just because this is going to be a fun, silly little game, I've downloaded some sounds. I downloaded them from freesound.org, which is my favorite sounds website, and I found one called Funny Fanfare, and let me show that to you right now. Let's go start sound, and it sounds a little like this. Now, I don't want that happening every time I test the game, so I'm going to move it over to the side here. You guys can add it to your game or not, or you can decide to add it later. But we do need that code in there before our game's done. I'm going to go to my looks menu now and grab a hide. We don't want this alphabet to be visible. We're going to have it basically pop across the top of the screen right now and start to make clones of itself with all the different letters that we're using. Okay, we need to initialize some variables, so let's go ahead and do that. I've gone ahead and created all the variables you need for this game. You guys remember, though, if you want to make a variable from scratch, you can just click on the white Make a Variable button, and then you'll get the choice to fill in this form with the type of variable. Usually we would go with for all sprites. There's times when we need to have it just for one sprite, and I'll tell you when those times are. Okay, so let's set our variables. First of all, our score. So let's go set score to 0. We always want to reset our score at the beginning of the game. Now, we have a variable for when we guess right and a variable for when we guess wrong, because both those numbers are important in our game, and different things happen depending on whether you are right or wrong, of course. So we're gonna set correct guess to 0 and set incorrect guess to 0. So we haven't guessed yet. So of course, we don't have anything in those variables yet. Okay, now we're going to get into some functions here. Functions, remember, are these my blocks. They're special blocks that basically send your code off to a little side tunnel where they're going to do a little job for you and then come back and keep going. In coding, we call that a subroutine. It just basically means you're going off on a little diversion and then coming back to the main path again later. And that's usually so that we can put everything that has to do with one thing that we can do into that involves a bunch of blocks, put it into one nice tiny little bit of code that we can call over and over again. Let me save my file right now. There we go. And okay, so we're gonna create a new custom block called load word list. And this is where we're gonna start manipulating this list that we have on our screen here. So define word list. And we have a new block here called a load word list. So as soon as the code gets to this spot, it's going to jump down to this block here and do everything that's under here. So we're going to do the same thing. Let's jump over to this block and follow the path of the code around that circle that we just showed you. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is erase this word list so that we're not adding the same word more than once. So all the commands for lists, by the way, are below your variables. These dark brown or darker brown kind of blocks of code here, and they will explain everything that, they will have all the commands here that have to do with manipulating these lists, and we're going to use a bunch of them today. Okay, so we're going to find the one that says delete all. Hold it, delete. And the one that says delete all of word list. Oh, here it is. So there's one here that says delete one item, and down here below it, it says delete all of word list. So you'll notice I've got my word list on the screen here. As soon as I click this is totally blank now. Now we have to reload the elements from this list here. Okay. Now we're going to be using a variable called the letter I here. I wanted to show you this today. It's not much of a variable, it's just one letter, right? But in coding, we use this letter I all the time when we're going into a loop. So these little bits of code here that we've been using quite a bit, this repeat a certain number of times. When you're coding with text coding, you almost always use this letter I. It's repeat. So we would basically set I to 1 to 10, and it would repeat I number of times, like 10 times. So 1, 2, 3 through 10 that way. And it's always that letter I that keeps track of how many times we've been around this loop. Why we use the letter I don't know. I would have to look it up because I don't actually have that little bit of trivia in my head. Okay, so we're going to set that variable set letter I to 1. So that's the number of times we're going to, so that's marking the first time we've been around this loop. Okay, how many times are we going to go around this loop now? Well, that depends on how many words there are on our list, right? I just added words to our list, so if I had said there was 8 items on the list, now it's going to ignore the last 2, which means that every time I add or take a word away from this list, I have to change these variables around. That's annoying, so we're not going to do that. We're going to go grab our repeat loop. Let's go to Control, repeat 10 times. But this bubble here where it says 10, we're going to fill that up with something that says, how many items are there on this list? We know there's 10 items on this list, so let's go back to our list variables. And we're going to grab a little bubble here that says length of word list. So this bubble contains that information, how many items are there on our list. We can test that by clicking on it. You can see that it'll tell us the number is 0 because that is our word list that we've just emptied, right? Let's look at the word pool, and I'll click on it again. And yeah, there's 10 items on that list. So it knows now. So I'm going to repeat for the number of items in the word pool. So now it's going to repeat 10 times. If I add 1 to the list, it'll repeat 11. You get it, right? All right. Now, we need to pick the first word from this list and insert it into the word list. So we've got to pick one of these, and we're going to make it the variable word to insert. So I've got a variable in here called word to insert. Let's pull that out here right now because we're going to need it in a minute. Now, I want to set that variable to basically the item on the word list, to the first item on the word list, which is zombie, right? So let's go set variable, set word pick, or word to insert, word to insert to, now we need to go down to our list variables again. I'm going to find one that says item 1 of word list. I don't want it to be word list, I want it to be word pool, of course. Let's look and see what item 1 of word pool is. We'll click on it, and you can see the first word is zombie here, so we have the right information here. Now, the thing is, when it comes around to the next one, we want it to increment itself, so it's looking at number 2 of that list, and that's where we're going to use that letter I. So let's go grab our letter I variable right here. So set word to insert to item 1 of word pool. Now that we've figured out which word to insert, we have to actually insert it. So let's go grab an insert command. Insert. There's two different versions. Oh yeah, okay. All right, here we go. Oh, I moved the other one out of the way here. Let's just make sure I don't bury it. Okay, so we're going to insert something at a certain space on our word list. We are adding to the word list right now. So what are we going to insert? We're going to insert the word to insert. Where are we going to insert it? At letter I of word list. Okay, and now all we have to do is change that letter I, make it number 2 instead of number 1, and then it'll pick the second word and add that to the list. So let's go change that variable, letter I, to 1. I'm going to save my file, and I'm pretty sure this will work. So how will we know this worked? All the words in this list will be transferred over to our word list. Let's click the green flag and see what happens. And there we go. Our list has copied over perfectly. So that is how you build a word list on the fly, which is pretty cool. And so now when we can start deleting these one at a time, every time we pick a word, we're going to delete one. Next time we reset the game, it'll just repopulate that list again, and you never have to type words again. So if someone else starts playing this game, they can modify your word pool, remix it, save it, and then their words will populate into the game. Okay, so that's quite a bit already. Let's take a little break. My file is saved, so if you need to reload and catch up with us, you can do that right now. And I'm gonna go have a chat with my live audience now. Thanks. All right, we're back, and we are ready to keep going. So our word list is populating properly. We don't need it clogging up our screen. Let's get rid of it right now. All right, so our two word lists are on the screen, taking up a lot of space. So let's get rid of them right now. I'm going to go down to our make list function. You can see the little blue check marks. We're going to uncheck those. The lists are still there, but they're not visible now, and they're just not going to clog up our screen, which is really, really good. Oh, I've got my my poor scaffold is tipped over, so I'm going to make it go back to normal again because I think that's a better look for this game. I'm still coding alphabet though, by the way. Okay, so we've just finished defining that word list. Let's go back to the main chunk of code here, and we're going to add the next bit. So we've gotten past this prep game part of the game now. Now we're going to set up the match. We're going to set up our game board and get it to pick a word and then put that word down into onto the screen here. So let's do that next. All right, so once we finish loading the list up, we're going to do a new function, which is pick our random word. So we're going to make a new block. We're going to say pick random word. Oh, okay. All right, and in here, let's code a few different things. Pick random word. Where did that go? Oh, here it is. Okay. Just a couple of things we need here. So we're going to, we have a variable. Let me save my file here. I haven't really done anything yet, but I'll save it anyway. All right. So let's, so what we're going to do is randomly pick one of the words from this word list now. We need to do two things. Pick a word from that list and then delete that word from the list. And that's all we're going to do inside this pick random word. So let's go to our variables. We'll select a pick set variable. Which variable are we setting? Word pick. So that's the word that we pick from the list. Set word pick to. We need a random number. So let's go grab a random number here from our operators. We'll grab pick random 1 to 10 and pop that into that little hole. Wait for it to glow, then let go. All right. So how many random numbers do we pick from the list here? You guys who've been paying attention will probably know it's the number of words on the list. How many words are there on the list? Well, again, we have something that keeps track of that. Let's go back to our variables, and we're going to grab the little bubble that says length of word list. Okay, so we're going to pick a random number from 1 to 10 because that's the number of words on our list. And that number, like number 2, is gonna signify word number 2. Let me call my word list here again so I can show you. So let's say we picked a 2, that would be elephant, right? So Scratch still doesn't know it's an elephant yet, though. We have to take that word that we picked, or that number, which is the word pick number 2, and turn that into the word elephant, right? So that's the next thing we have to do. So I think I explained that a little bit wrong when I explained it a second ago. Let's go set another variable. And that variable is, because word pick is a number, so we need a variable that's an actual word. And that is going to be game word. That's the variable we're using. So that's going to actually be filled up with the word that we're doing in the game. So set game word to the second item on the list, or the number that we picked off that list here. So what we need is, so let's go back to our list functions here. There's an item here that says item 1 of word list. So if we click on that, you see it'll tell us zombie. If I change that to 2, it'll change it to elephant. So if we can put the proper number in here, let's pop that into our game word here. If we can put the proper number in there, and that number, of course, is the number we just saved in that variable called word pick. So let's put a word pick in there. So now we're setting our game word to be item, whatever the random pick is. So we can actually watch this running right now by clicking on this define pick random word here. Let's see what the random number was. So I'm going to get both these bubbles here so I can show you how it worked. So the number I picked was, whoa, that's my word list, right? So I need word pick and game word. Here we go. Sorry, game word. All right, so the random number that I picked was 4, which is scratch, right? Now when I click on game word, you'll see game word is scratch. So we've successfully told Scratch to pick a word from the list and then to make it the word that we're going to be picking in our game right now. So far so good. That's all we need inside pick random right now. There's one other function here that I said, which is delete the word from the list, but I think that's over in the next bit. We could have put it here, we could have put it in the next block of code, but we're gonna, for now, leave it the way that I have it in the documentation. Okay, so back to our main strip of code here now. We've created this pick random word, but we haven't actually added it to our code. So let's go to our my blocks and add a pick random word down there. I'm going to save my file again before you guys bug me. All right. So now we have another function here to do, and that is setting up the game board. You'll remember that that the next thing we have to do is take that word scratch and make it appear along the top of the screen here, right? It's going to be invisible, so we will know that the letters are there because of the white underline underneath them. We're going to get at least as far as that much today. Sorry, excuse me. All right, so let's go create another function that says set up game board. Make a new block, set up game board. And we're going to do quite a bit more coding inside here to get that game board set up. So let's go set up game board. I'm going to grab the new red block where I can define what setup game board means. And let's get to that. Okay, the first thing I want to do, I already saved the file, Maya. I'm not sure what you're bugging me about. All right, I want to hide that list again. I don't want that list visible on my screen right now because I'm not interested in it. Okay, setting up game board. So we're still in this alphabet sprite. Let me show you the alphabet sprite. It's right over here right now. It keeps moving around based on the number of words I'm adding, and it's on letter E, right? We don't want that either. So that's a couple of the things we need to change. We need to bring it back to its start position, which is over on the left here, and then have it pick all the letters in the word scratch, S-C-R-A-T-C-H, and put them all the way along the top of the list here. So the first thing we want to do is move. So let's go to our motion blocks. We'll just grab a go to XY command, which just tells it to go to a new spot. We have to fill it in with these numbers, minus 197 and 150. And so as soon as I click on that, you'll see my letter will pop into a nice starting position here with a little bit of a margin on both sides. All right, the next thing we want to do here is we're going to start going through the letters in our game word and putting each one down here one at a time. So we have to go inside a loop because we're going to do something multiple times now. Let's go to control, repeat, and we're going to repeat the number of times that matches the number of letters in the game word. So we're going to do something similar to what we did with the list, but under our operators, there's a bunch of commands here that have to do with variables. So it's the same kind of things, letter one of the word. So instead of looking at items on a list, we're looking at words inside a variable, and that's what we're doing. We can find the length of it here. We can change the letters of it, and so it depends. So whether you're using these green ones or using the brown ones depends on whether you're working on a variable or working on a list. Variables are usually about words or smaller pieces, and lists are about individual words, right? Or sentences or paragraphs or things like that. Each list item could be an entire paragraph of text if you wanted it to be, right? Okay. So we're repeating a number of times here, and that's the length of the game list. So we need to find this block here that says the length of apple. We don't want it length of the word apple. We want it length of our game word. So let's go to our variables, grab the bubble that says game word, and pop that in there. Now, we're going to be using that letter I again. We can keep using it over and over again because this program is linear. At this point, everything's happening one thing at a time. So if we reuse the same variable, it's not going to be a big deal because we're going to reset it to the beginning, run it, and then when the next piece of code needs that letter I, it's going to do the same thing. Now, of course, we don't want two parts of the program working simultaneously, both using that variable, because, whoa, what a mess that would be, right? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our that variable I. So right before the loop, we're going to set I to 0. And then as soon as we get into it here, we're going to change it. We're going to keep changing it by 1. So we're going to change I by 1. So it's going to go from 0 to 1 for the first time around, and then to 2, then to 3. All right. So the first thing we want to do, when I named these costumes for this letter, you can see that I named, that I did them in alphabetical order. That's really essential. And I named them the same thing that their letter meant too. So item A is called A, and it's costume 1. These things all come into play in a little bit. So I want you to see how carefully I set these things up. So now my A is at the top here. So we're going to change, here we go, switch costume. So we're going to change the costume of this to match the letter of the first word, right? So let's go to our looks menu. We'll go switch costume to, and this command will switch to any letter. If I wanted F, for example, I could click on here and it turns to an F. Let's pop that in there. We're going to get it to switch to the first letter of the game word. So let's go back to our green operator blocks. There's a command here again for dealing with letters inside a word. Letter 1 of apple. Let's grab that and pop that in where the costume name is supposed to be. We're going to get the costume name to match the letter of the alphabet that we've picked here, right? So what are we going to pop in here? Letter 1 of game word. So letter 1, we don't want letter 1, we want an I in here, of course, because that's the number of times we've gone through this loop. And we need to put game word here. There we go. Letter. So switch costume to letter 1 of game word. You remember our game word was scratch. So when I click this, if this is working properly, that letter should change to the letter S. Let's try it out. Oh, it's F. If I changed it, what's our game word now? Our game word is scratch. Which, oh, I haven't told I what it is right now. So we've got to change I by 1. So I is 1 now. Let's just confirm that. Oh, so I is a totally different number. So let's set I, just to test this, I'm going to set I to 1. All right, so when the program comes around here, now my I is 1. I can hide that again. Now, when I go switch costume to the first letter of game word, it should come back with the letter S. And there we go. Our letter has changed to S, so that's working beautifully. Let's put it back in there. I'm going to trash this and save my file. All right. So now that we have the right letter down here, we can plunk it down here by cloning it. So let's go create a clone of myself. Control, create a clone of myself. That's going to plunk that letter S down there, and then we can start manipulating that. All right. Now, we also want to get that underline underneath the letter S. So let me show you that underline graphic that I have here. Again, I'm making it show. It's over here right now. So again, we need to make it appear right underneath the letter I. I actually designed this so that it was the exact height under. Again, it's hard to see it here. I'm going to highlight so you can see it. Here's my middle, and here's my line. I moved it far enough underneath the middle of my screen so that it would know that even if I placed it in the middle of this sprite, it's still going to show up underneath it. That was an important thing about the way that I set this up. Okay, back to my code again for the alphabet. Create a clone of myself. Now we're going to set, we need a variable. This is a bit complicated, guys, but when you want something to happen over in another sprite, you can often send messages back and forth, okay? So if I wanted to move my underline underneath its letter S, I could create an event here, set underline or something like that, and then have this guy underline listen for that message. When I receive that event set underline, move over here and clone yourself or whatever it is I'm going to do in a second here. But a different way to do it, and sometimes a more advantageous way, is by controlling it with a variable. Now in this game I did a little bit of that, a little bit more of that than usual, and there's a reason for that, which is we're working with a lot of clones where the clones have to tell us what they are. Like there's going to be a bunch of clones of letters here, but we're going to be controlling them from outside. So I need to basically when you're doing stuff with clones and you're sending messages to them, often every single clone will receive the message and do something. So that's not cool. We don't want every single clone doing something. Often we just want one letter doing something. And in order to do that, we have to kind of find workarounds. And one of the workarounds here I'm going to show you is we're just going to create a variable called draw underline. So let's go to my variables, set draw underline to 1. So what's going to happen is while draw underline is 1, this underline is going to know to go over here and make a clone of himself. When it turns to 0, it's going to know that it shouldn't do it anymore. And so that way we can just turn it on and off. We can put that, we're just creating a clone making machine that's going to say, as soon as I get that button press that says set underline, I'm going to stamp it down, and then I'm going to turn myself off again. And so this machine will keep waiting for that variable to click, and every time it clicks, it's going to stamp down another underline for me. Okay, so we're going to set underline to 1, and then we're going to wait. So let's go to our control blocks. We're going to grab a command here that says wait until. And that's going to be wait until that variable goes back to 0 again. So let's put an equal sign into here. And we're going to drag, so we're going to say draw underline is equal to 0. Variables, draw underline. So it's, there it is. Okay, so it's very important the program not keep going until that underline is drawn. We're going to turn that machine on, stamp 1 underline, then this program's going to wait till it's done, and then it's going to carry on with the rest of the code here. And all right, we're going to come back to this little bit. There's a bit more code to do here, but since we're waiting for that draw underline, let's jump over to the underline and do that part next, okay? So, okay, I'm actually going to take a little break and check with my audience, and we'll be right back. Let me save my file. Okay, we're back. So we were about to start setting up the underline so that we would know how many letters there are in our puzzle. Let's get over to that right now. So here's my underline. There's no code there at all. We're going to start with a green flag. And let's make this bigger again here. All right, when green flag clicked, the first thing we want to do is hide this thing. We don't, so this is the master one that's going to go around stamping. It has to be invisible so that we're not seeing it active on the screen. So we'll go to our looks menu, select a hide. And then we need a forever. So let's grab a forever, and we're just gonna start. We are going to, yeah, we're going to be waiting for that draw underline to turn into 1. We're going to be sitting there poised, waiting to go chunk chunk and stamp an underline down beneath us. So let's put an if statement in there, and we're going to grab an equal sign from our operators, and we're going to say if draw underline is equal to 1, then where are we going to go? The first thing we want to do is go right to where that letter is, because we're going to stamp it right underneath. So we're going to go to, let's go to our motion blocks. We're going to grab one of these blocks here that says go to random position and pop it in there. We don't want to go to a random position though, so we're going to hit on that little triangle and pick one of the options, which is the name of all our sprites. I'm going to go say go to alphabet, which is that sprite that knows what our word is, right? Go there. Then we're going to show. So we're going to appear for a second so that when we stamp something down, it's going to be visible. Then we're going to create a clone of myself, and then we're going to hide right away again. We're not hiding the clone because the clone has its own instructions, right? We're just going to go hide, but that will clone the clone, that'll hide the clone maker. And then we're going to flip off that variable again. So let's go to variables, and we'll go set draw underline to 0. So we turned the machine on, it stamped our letter, and then it turned it off again. So let's go back to our alphabet now. Let me save my file. All right, back to the main strip of code again. Okay, we're drawing underline. So we just did wait until draw underline is equal to 0. So it went, drew our underline, came back again. I think we actually can test this out right now and see if it works. So I'm just going to get those variables in again. Word pick and game word. Okay, so let's run the green flag here again. Click green flag. So you can see that our stamp is down underneath there. It's visible now, so our underline's under our first word. If I show the first word letter here, well, first of all, let's see what our word pick was. So our word pick was number 4, which in our list is, let's look at that list again, word list, which is scratch again. So which means our game word is scratch, that's right. And the first letter should be letter S here. So let's show our variable. Ooh, an H. So we haven't stamped that letter down. I think there's still one more thing that has to happen. But our underline did get drawn. That's what we wanted, but we're not actually ready for the next step yet. We're going to do that in a sec here. So let's go. Next thing we have to do is tell it to go over to the next letter. So let's change our X. Let's go to our motion. We're going to change X by 30. That's the proper distance. If you want spacing and you want the next letter to be placed properly, you got to move it 30 pixels to the right of where it is right now. So that's everything we're doing in the repeat loop here. And we're going to keep repeating that for the length of letters in the word. When we're done repeating that, we want to switch. We don't want that, that underline to be visible. So we're going to switch that costume. Let's go to our looks. We're going to switch our costume over to the last costume, which has nothing in it, which is blank. And the reason we need that is because if we end up showing that variable again, the variable is going to be off on the side here, not one of the variables that's in our game, and we don't want it to be visible. So just to make sure it stays invisible, we're going to switch its default costume back to blank again so that it doesn't accidentally do something. And then we're going to hide it again as well. So let's go hide. All right, so now when we click the green flag, you can see that we have the 6 letters in our word. Hopefully we have a 6-letter word here. Let's see what our game word is here. Zombie, which has 6 letters exactly. And that was number 1 on our list here. Let's click the green flag again, and we'll see that we have a 7-letter word here, which is quality. One more time, 7-letter word, and we got quality again. It's just random numbers, right? It tends to do this sometimes. It gets stuck on one word. And that's one of the reasons why it's nice to delete that word from the list so that we don't pick it accidentally. Here's our game word, elephant. Okay, good. So our word is up there. The problem is that it is invisible. Even if we go show letter right now, you're not going to see it, right? So we're as we play the game, we're going to make these letters visible as we pick them from the bottom of the screen, and that's the way that's going to work. So we've got this all good here. This is inside setup game board inside the alphabet, right? I just want to make sure that green flag is good, and I think we're going to call it quits for today. So back under the main stream of code here. So we're picking random word, setting up game board, and actually that is the end of the code there. So we have done the entire first block right now. So what's going to happen next in our code here is we're going to populate the bottom of this board with a whole bunch of letters. Just by making clones, we're going to go clone A and then say change costume to the next one, then clone that one there, clone all the way across the board here. And these guys are all going to be sensitive to touch. So when we click on them, it'll say, which one are you clicking? Oh, you're clicking on the letter B. Let's go check this word and see if there's a B in it. If there is a B, make it visible. If there's not a B, change this costume. So that's basically the flow of things. And you can see how that fits in with our play here again. So that's the play and keep score part. And then after the game is finished, we're going to do the inventory, which means keeping track of how many times we've won and we've lost. Okay, that's all coming up for tomorrow. So in the meantime, I am going to sign off for today.